step aside, Christmas, as Halloween has been steadily growing as a heavy hitter in consumer spending throughout the years. Once the pressure of looking larger than life on TV every week goes away, many pro wrestlers start looking very different. Whether they lose the muscle, change their hairstyle, stop wearing outlandish clothing, or all of the above, many wrestlers are virtually unrecognizable after they hang up their boots. Vladimir Kozlov. From 2008 to 2012, WWE fans got to know Russian bruiser Vladimir Kozlov very well. As revealed by Space Coast Daily, Halloween is the second largest commercial holiday in the United States after Christmas, with an estimated $6 billion spent annually. Although costumes donned on Halloween are, for the most part, usually just worn once, the National Retail Federation reported in 2019 that shoppers claimed they would spend on average $86.27 on their outfits, meaning that the annual costs are only continuing to soar. That being said, is anyone surprised by these statistics? Halloween, for both children and adults alike, allows us an escape from reality. Costumes take inspiration from beloved TV and film characters, iconic celebrities, and timeless spooky ghouls. As Prosper Insight's executive vice president for strategy Phil Rist told the National Retail Federation, while children flock to the perennial favorites such as princesses and superheroes, adults that celebrate gravitate towards new ideas, or in other words, whatever is popular that year. While trends come and go, some pop culture characters have gained legendary status thanks to their likenesses being emulated by countless fans on All Hallows Eve. So, what was the top Halloween costume the year you were born? Grab some candy, throw on the Halloween theme song, and let's take a trip down memory lane. 1977–1978, dress up as Star Wars characters. You must. In 1977, the public was obsessed with A Galaxy Far, Far Away. Yup, you guessed it, we're talking about Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope, George Lucas's legendary space epic that's gone on to captivate audiences for decades to come. As Britannica notes, the flick became one of the most successful and influential franchises in motion picture history, earning almost $3 million in its first week and grossing $100 million by the end of the summer. Pretty crazy, right? So, how does a movie make that much during its opening run, when the concept of Star Wars wasn't the pop culture juggernaut it is today? Through marketing, of course. As the starlet who played Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, told Time, the thundering hooves of asteroid arrival and Death Star intervention had started many days before, adding that the release felt like an earthquake. She recalled driving past one line in front of a movie theater, filled with geeks and enthusiastic young people with sleeping bags. As Fisher revealed, I just stared in amazement. Of course, by the time Halloween rolled around only 5 months later, Star Wars was a cinematic phenomenon, and kids all over the country were flocking to dress up as their fave characters, from Princess Leia, Han Solo, and of course, Darth Vader. 1979–1980, It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. The Man of Steel, aka he started as a super-stoic monster, then evolved, maybe, into a wacky, fun-loving big man, prone to dancing, having tea parties, and tooting on invisible trombones with his tag partner and BFF, the equally wacky Santino Marella. Since leaving the ring, Kozlov has slimmed his body but jacked up his muscles. Superman was first introduced to the masses in 1933 when Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two teen artists from Cleveland, Ohio, released the first comic book featuring the red and blue-clad Crime Stopper. However, as revealed by Local.com, it's only in 1938 that the superhero reached widespread popularity after the iconic cover art of Superman lifting a car over his head was finally released. Fast forward 40 years later, and Clark Kent finally made his big screen debut during the Christmas season in 1978 with the release of Superman. At the time, the movie was revolutionary. The story proved to be just as monumental a cinematic culture shift as Jaws, and Star Wars, wrote The Hollywood Reporter in 2018, adding that it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and received a Special Achievement Oscar for visual effects. And just as the movie's tagline promised, audiences believed that a man could fly. Perhaps some of the younger viewers took a literal approach to Superman's ability to zip through the air. According to the New York Times, tragically enough, in 1979, a 4-year-old boy fell from a 7th-floor window. Apparently while trying to fly like Superman. He passed away at a hospital a few days later. Plus, he's grown a big, bushy beard that makes him look like a Russian Hugh Jackman. Why would he spend his retirement getting into better shape than during his day job? Because he's looking to make it big in Hollywood as an action movie tough. While there's no denying the popularity of this Halloween costume between 1979 and 1980, we're assuming there were at least a few hesitant parents. 1981–1982, Indiana Jones' outfit was simple, yet iconic. Cinematic king Steven Spielberg once declared he always wanted to make a James Bond film without the hardware via the telegraph. He's making some good progress, having appeared in Fast 6 as a stunt double. Between him and The Rock, that movie is full up with WWE refugees. He was also in The Wire, Burn Notice, and the Chinese Mega Smash Wolf Warrior 2. He even founded a production company in 2014 called Quasar Entertainment, where he currently serves as vice president. Now that Hugh Jackman is done with Wolverine, maybe he'll join up. Medusa, Alundra Blaze. Between WCW and WWF, Deborah Michelli was an undisputed pioneer. As Medusa in WCW, she proved women could both look beautiful and fight every bit as hard as men. Well, in June of 1981, alongside writer George Lucas, he did just that, with the release of Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford as the now legendary Indiana Jones. Although initially, the flick fared decently, it's only as the weeks went on that it became a success, grossing over $367 million worldwide. In fact, by the holiday season, the new joke in Hollywood was that the film would be the big Christmas movie of the year, after spending an incredible 6 months in theaters, via the New York Times. Of course, children across the country were looking at Indy with sheer adoration, or as Esquire so perfectly put it in 2019, right now there may be a whole generation of archaeologists who chose their profession purely out of a desire to become the next Indiana Jones. However, as kids, it was easier to ditch the books and head straight to the shops to find the complete outfit for the famed fictional archaeologist. As Alundra Blaze, she spearheaded the new WWF women's division and gave us classic matches with Japanese sensations like Bull Nakano, Asia Kong, Luna Vachon, and Monster Ripper, known in the WWF as Trailer Park Princess Bertha Faye. Per Esquire, few characters in cinematic history have as iconic a look as Indiana Jones, so all kids really had to do was get their hands on a brown leather jacket, khakis, boots, and, of course, Indiana Jones' legendary fedora. 1983–1984, everyone wanted to be a zombified Michael Jackson. Is there any music video more memorable than Michael Jackson's Thriller? Probably not, and it's something that even fans knew when word of the video's production leaked to the public. But after rejoining WCW in 1995 and throwing the WWF Women's Championship belt in the trash on live TV, something she says WCW scripted her to do, she became persona non grata to Vince McMahon and company. Once WCW became WWF property in 2001, Medusa elected to retire rather than deal with backlash from her former company. Since then, Blaze has become a tattooed Renaissance woman. She got into monster trucks and quickly turned into a champion driver, winning international contests in her truck, which she naturally named Medusa, and even serving as vice president of her own monster truck league for a year. In addition, she opened up a pet spa and doggy bakery, and serves as commissioner of a Japanese women's wrestling promotion called World Wonder Ring Stardom. In a clip from making of Michael Jackson's Thriller, countless Jackson devotees swarmed the set to catch a glimpse of the King of Pop, with one LAPD officer telling the camera there were about 300 to 400 children present. Sure enough, Michael Jackson delivered. As Live About wrote years later in 2020, when the video first appeared on MTV on December 2, 1983, it captured the imaginations of young and old and impressed everyone with the intensive makeup and special effects. Was anyone surprised? The singer looked downright cool for the majority of the nearly 15-minute video, strutting around in his now legendary red leather jacket and matching pants, surrounded by dancing ghouls. Even in the end, when Jackson turns into a monster himself, the appeal to kids was still there, as director John Landis of An American Werewolf in London fame ensured the star didn't look too hideous via The Guardian. The result? A total success, or as Rolling Stone put it, Michael Jackson towered over the 1980s the way Elvis Presley dominated the 1950s. Halloween for the next few years was a sea of red jackets and zombified makeup, and even to this day, the red leather ensemble immediately brings back memories.
1985–1986, 1-2, Freddy's Coming for You. In 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, the character of Freddy Krueger absolutely terrified children, and why wouldn't he? Krueger was known for his ability to appear in your dreams, embody your biggest fears, and subsequently slice you to pieces with his claws. Sorry, Edward Scissorhands, you could never compete. Morbidly enough, director Wes Craven got the idea for the flick thanks to a real-life incident. As he told Vulture in 2014, he found inspiration for Kruger after reading an article in the LA Times describing a refugee child from the Cambodian genocide who was terrified to sleep. She might not look like she did in the ring, but she's clearly as successful as ever. Ultimate Warrior. Anyone with even a passing knowledge of 80s and 90s WWF knows of the Ultimate Warrior. The reason? He feared he would be attacked in his dreams and pass away. With his humongous biceps, wild face paint, endlessly high energy, and incomprehensible yet exciting interview style, Warrior was the personification of wrestling's cartoonish superhero side. But as he continued to burn bridges with wrestling companies and wrestlers alike, Warrior found himself in the ring less and less. Warrior, that became his legal name in 1993, by the way, became a controversial right-wing motivational speaker and blogger, and if the caption below his TV appearances didn't identify him as Warrior, you probably wouldn't recognize him. He had a goatee, no face paint, far fewer muscles, and his hair wasn't nearly as teased as it was when he was body-slamming fools at WrestleMania. His final public appearance, at WWE Raw in 2014 just a day before his death, showed a short-haired guy with a white goatee who only looked like the Ultimate Warrior when he put on a mask resembling his old face paint and began to talk like him. He's gone now, but it's good he was able to remind fans who he truly was one more time before he went. Rick Steiner is the slightly off-center half of the Steiner brothers. Rick quickly endeared himself to fans in both WCW and WWF. He called himself the dog-face gremlin, and acted the part, too, always barking and running around on all fours before wrestling circles around his opponents and either stretching them within an inch of their lives or dropping them square on their heads, whichever felt most right at the time. His trademark amateur wrestling headgear, often worn loosely and unstrapped because, again, he was off-center, made him a memorable character long after he retired from full-time competition in 2008. Since then, Steiner has become a shockingly regular-looking guy. He tried to stay awake for days at a time, Craven recalled, adding, when he finally fell asleep, his parents thought this crisis was over. He still has his goatee, but his hair is short-cropped and his headgear is probably in his garage somewhere. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. It's ironic that a character known for killing children in their sleep happened to be a hit when it came to Halloween from 1985 to 1986, yet that's exactly what happened. What's more, he now has regular guy jobs and interests. He runs a successful real estate company in Georgia. He's even less recognizable when wearing a suit, and served on the Cherokee County School Board for a time. Probably the only way you'd recognize him in public is if he barked at you, something you likely don't want him, or anyone else, to do. Lex Luger, the total package. Lex Luger had one of the most impressive physiques in wrestling history. In WWF, they called him the narcissist, because his body was so perfect he couldn't stop staring at himself. It wasn't even close to an exaggeration. Those days are, sadly, gone forever. As the New York Post puts it, along with spawning countless sequels and being named the 40th greatest villain in history by the American Film Institute, Freddy Krueger was also the subject of countless Halloween costumes bought last minute at local drug stores. 1987–1988, the X-rated RoboCop appealed to children, too, dubbed the greatest science fiction film since Metropolis by director Ken Russell, via the Criterion Collection. RoboCop was groundbreaking for its time. As IndieWire explains, at the time, nobody had ever seen anything like it, adding that it modernized robot movies, while challenging the political, cultural and social climate. Released in 1987, the flick gained 2 Academy Award nominations and came in 14th at the box office that year. While it didn't hit the number 1 spot, it certainly had the most recognizable costume design and special effects. RoboCop's success was incredible. Present-day Luger is a literal shell of his former self. That's because in 2007, he suffered a spinal infraction that left him paralyzed from the neck down. Per Esquire, it spawned 2 sequels, a television series, some anime, and even a remake decades later in 2014. He's since gained feeling in his body and can even briefly walk with a cane, but all his muscle mass is gone. Interestingly enough, while the movie was incredibly violent and achieved an X rating via IndieWire, it was still marketed towards children. Along with toys and commercials, there was also a children's television show, and the costumes that followed, which bore a closer resemblance to the animated series than the gory, live-action original. As one writer from the Retro Network so perfectly summarizes what every child in 1987 was thinking, despite the bloody bodies being ripped to shreds by bullets on the TV screen that night, I woke up the next morning with only one thought in my head: RoboCop looks awesome. 1989–1990, Batmania ruled America. When the original Batman TV series came out in 1966, it was an accurate depiction of the masked comic book superhero that children and adults alike grew to recognize. Where once he was 275 pounds of solid strength, he's now roughly 185 pounds of skin and bones. As he explained it in 2008, "I was one of the strongest guys on the planet." As Den of Geek writes, this Adam West rendition walked the line between loving adaptation and straight-up parody. With that taken into consideration, it's obvious why there was widespread hesitation with the 1989 big-screen Batman debut. As an article by Mental Floss details, a market research group assessed Batman's potential as a total flop, adding that according to marketing data, it was actually the Incredible Hulk who was more popular, with Batman being only a quarter as appealing as the California Raisins. Totally lame, right? To make matters even worse, Michael Keaton, who would end up playing the Caped Crusader, didn't have a lot of early defenders when he took on the role via Uproxx. Nevertheless, production blitzed forward. For Mental Floss, the film was released on June 23, 1989, and went on to gross $253.4 million, making it the fifth most successful motion picture up to that point. Soon enough, the movie ruled the summer of 1989, and its merchandising was in full swing, including hats, shirts, posters, toys, and bedsheets. Simply put, people didn't merely want to see Batman, but instead wanted to be him, too. Was there any Halloween costume more popular than the Caped Crusader during this time? We think not. 1991–1992, The Terminator came back. Although it was a sequel, Terminator 2, Judgment Day still managed to become one of the top movies of the year, grossing over a whopping $500 million worldwide. Did anyone expect anything less from a film that reportedly had a budget of $100 million? As it turns out, Arnold Schwarzenegger's lead role as the Terminator took a surprising twist. This time around, he wasn't a heartless robotic monster. As the AV Club notes, it takes this character, one who had been a terrifying and brutal killing machine in the last movie, and establishes him as the good guy. Unsurprisingly, kids thought he was the coolest character ever. I was bench pressing 450 pounds my senior year of high school. I was a freak. Basically, I was Ralphie from A Christmas Story, writes Germain Lucier of Gizmodo, detailing his quest as an 11-year-old dying to see the flick. There was a lot of talk about the movie. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, I wouldn't shut up. I became obsessed with the movie. Now I can't lift a 1-pound dumbbell. He can probably lift at least a few pounds these days, but the only way he'll grasp 450 pounds is if he travels to England and hits the ATM. Since then, he's been focusing on family, his faith. He's been a born-again Christian since 2006, and rebuilding his life outside wrestling. I bought posters, toys, everything. Schwarzenegger helped boost the film's popularity off-camera, too, even visiting elementary schools to motivate kids to be more active in their spare time. He has far more personal strength than physical at this point, and that's almost certainly for the best. Val Venus fans of late 90s WWF will remember Val Venus, especially the ladies his gimmick was geared toward. According to the Los Angeles Times, a sea of children, and sometimes moms, could be seen shouting, "Arnold! Arnold! Arnold!" whenever he'd appear. He was supposedly a male porn star turned wrestler, with flowing hair, an exquisite body, writhing hips, endless naughty innuendos, including his last name, and entrance gear that made it look like he was wearing nothing but a towel. There's no doubt dressing up as the Terminator for Halloween would have won you major popularity points, even if only for the opportunity to coolly deliver the classic one-liner from the flick, "Hasta la vista, baby." 1993 to 1996, which color Power Ranger were you? Was there any kid in the 90s that didn't argue with their friends over which color Power Ranger they wanted to be? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers first wowed U.S. audiences in 1993, using old footage from a Japanese show called Super Sentai and adding new content adapted for American viewers. According to a 2013 article by The Hollywood Reporter, the series initially faced a round of rejections until it finally found a home on Fox. More often than not, he would feud with a wrestler after filming a movie with that wrestler's girlfriend or valet. By the time we had aired our third episode, we were the most popular thing on the air, mused Ellie Deckel, current president of Sabin Brands. Soon enough, every child was dying to morph into their favorite ranger, and this was made possible with countless toys, merchandise, and Halloween costumes. And yes, because this was the Attitude Era, he was a good guy. Today, Venus looks less like an adult film star and more like a high school substitute teacher. His long, curly hair is completely gone, and while he's still handsome enough for risque roles, he's too busy for that, and for most wrestling. It's far easier for a child, or anybody, to project themselves into that costume and imagine themselves as a Power Ranger, explains Brian Casentini, Sabin Brands' Senior VP of Development and Production. His main interest appears to be marijuana legalization. To be able to watch the show and then go and play it, either through role play or through action figures, that's just a natural desire for children. The show definitely did something right because its popularity never went away. In fact, the franchise still sells millions of dollars. As USA Today asks, why are we so nostalgic for the Power Rangers, specifically? Simply put, if you didn't grow up with it, it's difficult to nail down the appeal. 1997, Ghostface from Scream made slashers cool again. Joining the ranks of Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, Ghostface from Scream became a sudden slasher favorite following the movie's December 1996 release. As he told The Inquisitor in 2015, he feels pot saved his life, and he believes medical marijuana can save many more lives as well. As Dazed writes, the flick completely redefined that stale, slasher genre that was so popular a decade prior, adding that the dormant genre had become oversaturated with straight-to-video films and recycled, uninventive and cliched plots. Scream, on the other hand, was different. It was self-aware, addressing horror tropes and subsequently making a parody out of them. Per Newsday, it went on to become a $173 million success and inevitably launched a franchise. As for Ghostface, his costume was simple yet effective. As it turned out, in the 90s, the mask was available at any Halloween shop, and it's only after producer Marianne Maddalena came across it one day and showed it to director Wes Craven that Ghostface was born, via The Hollywood Reporter. Following Scream's popularity, the simple costume of the mask inspired by Edvard Munch's painting The Scream and a black toga has become a Halloween staple, with shops regularly stocking replicas of the mask and robe, via The Guardian. He even runs his own pot business, Health for Life Dispensary based out of Mesa, Arizona. Not a bad retirement path for a guy who got famous for seductively placed hot dogs in his entrance video. Eve Torres. In 2007, Eve Torres won WWE's Diva Search, a competition designed to find new female superstars. Over a 6-year career, Torres won the Divas Championship 3 times and became a popular weekly fixture, though she was rarely presented as a true physical threat, as this was during a period in WWE when divas were, sadly, more about physical beauty than ring prowess. Today, however, Torres could be considered a true physical threat. She looks largely the same, but she's now a full-fledged fighter. Unfortunately enough, according to Newsday, it also paved the way for copycat crimes and some real-life teen murder sprees. 1998, we really wanted to dress up as the Spice Girls. The Spice Girls were practically every tween girl's obsession since they told us what they want, what they really want in 1996 with the release of their debut single, Wannabe. According to the Sheffield Telegraph, Wannabe topped the UK singles chart for 7 weeks, then made its way across the pond in January of 1997, where it topped the Billboard Hot 100 for 4 weeks. The girls themselves were characters, each with their own distinct looks, giving fans options as to who they wanted to emulate. A lover of sports? Take after Sporty Spice. Married to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu icon Renner Gracie, Torres is a purple belt in the martial art. A Barbie aficionado? Baby Spice is for you. The one common denominator for all the Spice Girls was that they were outrageous when it came to fashion. As The Independent puts it, the shoes were preposterously large, the latex was worryingly shiny and all that neon was practically blinding, but somehow, it worked. Although Jerry Halliwell, more commonly known as Ginger Spice, left the group in May of 1998 citing differences between bandmates and extreme tiredness, via BBC, this didn't stop fans from across the world from dressing up as their favorite Spice for Halloween. She's also a trained kickboxer and the head instructor of a women's self-defense program called Gracie Women Empowered, helping other girls become as tough and brave as she is. Maybe it had something to do with Hellowell's iconic Union Jack dress from the year prior? 1999-2000, Neo and Trinity are to blame for tiny sunglasses and leather dusters. The turn of the millennium saw us all discussing whether we'd take the red pill or the blue pill, an instantly recognizable question for anyone who watched 1999's The Matrix. When in a less bruising mode, Torres works as a party planner with her sister-in-law. Together, they run an event rental company called Enjoy the Party. In addition, according to a leaked WWE Raw script from 2014, Torres worked, and possibly still works, as an ambassador for WWE after retiring from the ring. If she does return, however, she could absolutely be a believable WWE Women's Champion, especially now that the company is focusing on women who can actually wrestle. Sunny in the late 90s, few wrestling women could match Tammy Sunny Sitch in pure popularity. Her beauty, charisma, and sex appeal endeared her to millions, and at one time, according to WWE.com, she was even the most downloaded woman in all of America online. Yep, this was definitely the 90s. She wasn't a great wrestler, but she was an amazing personality, and just about every fan's dream girl come true. Today, however, you'd be hard-pressed to figure why today's Sunny is a shell of her former self. The flick itself was revolutionary, blending sci-fi, kung fu elements, and special effects that included bullets traveling in slow-mo and jaw-dropping fight sequences. She's gained a lot of weight, as many wrestlers do, but in addition, almost all her charisma, personality, and sunniness is gone, replaced by a desperate woman battling seemingly endless drug, money, and legal issues, as recapped in The Gossip Life. She's been arrested several times, including a stint in 2012, documented in the video above, where she found herself arrested twice in 2 days for stalking an ex-boyfriend, and 5 times in 1 month. Simply put, if you weren't rocking long leather duster coats, tiny sunglasses, and chunky black boots on Halloween in 2000, what were you really doing? Perhaps our obsession with The Matrix had something to do with Y2K, the supposed turn-of-the-century bug that would bring our infrastructure to a terrifying halt, via The Guardian. When the bug failed to become a reality, we were ready to embrace a new, futuristic world and had exciting technological gadgets to boot. The Matrix gave birth to a new cyberpunk fashion trend, even inspiring high-end designers such as Dior mere months after its release. In 2013, she found herself in jail for 114 days, after violating a restraining order put out by that same ex-boyfriend. She makes money these days through the odd independent wrestling gig, but also through less savory methods, like adult films, sexy Skype chats, and charging fans money to cuddle with her in bed. Here's hoping sunnier days are ahead for the WWE Hall of Famer who countless fans no doubt consider their first crush. Scott Hall in his prime, Scott Hall was the coolest. Unless we were already wearing costumes from the now cult classic, Halloween was the perfect opportunity to dress as either Neo, Keanu Reeves, or Trinity, Carrie-Anne Moss, showing everyone that we were woke when it came to philosophical concepts and warnings about the corruptive potential of technology via Little White Lies. In the WWF, he was Razor Ramon, basically Al Pacino in Scarface if he wrestled. In WCW, under his real name, he was one of the tough-talking, rebellious founders of the New World Order. Unfortunately, like many a grappler, drugs and alcohol overtook Hall, and he's been struggling to become himself again for a long time. Today's Scott Hall looks like Scott Hall in the face, but that's about it. His famously wet, curly hair is now gray and scraggly, and he's heavier than he used to be. But amazingly, a few years ago he looked even worse. In 2011, Hall was drunk in public, completely out of shape, and could barely walk. By 2013, he looked pale, tired, bloated, and was using a wheelchair. That was the year, as recapped by Jim Ross for Fox Sports, that he finally began to turn his life around, thanks to fellow retired wrestler Diamond Dallas Page. He began religiously working out and living healthier through Dallas's DDP yoga program, and not only regained much of his strength and mobility, he stopped drinking as much. By 2017, he was showing off a ripped physique on Twitter, one that could very well signal a return to the ring sooner or later. Wrestling needs more bad guys anyway. Psycho Sid was a monster throughout the 90s. With his curly blonde hair, ripped physique, creepy theme music, crazy eyes, and super intense, talk softly then yell ferociously, style of speaking, Sid was just plain awesome. He played cool bad guy who kicked ass while wearing black trunks and black boots, years before Stone Cold Steve Austin made it trendy. But in 2001, the man who rules the world shattered his leg in an in-ring accident. His injury was so gruesome we're not linking to it here. He wrestled sporadically since then, officially retiring for good in August 2017. The transfer of world ownership to a new ruler is still pending. Sid today kind of resembles Prime Sid, but not really. He's not as jacked anymore, and his blonde hair is shorter yet still curly, making him look something like a burly Art Garfunkel. But that's nothing compared to his most drastic post-fame change, bodybuilder. Yes, in 2012, at the age of 51, Sid took a stab at bodybuilding, getting ripped, oiled up, and fat-free against competitors far younger than he. It worked so well, he apparently did it once and then never again. It's hard to fill the void after no longer ruling the world. Vader. Few wrestlers were as imposing in their prime as Vader. At over 450 pounds of muscle and a knack for legitimately injuring people he wrestled, Vader was a scary, scary man. There's a reason WWF nicknamed him the Mastodon when he worked for them. He was basically a human elephant. Since 2007, Vader has been mostly retired, and you can tell. He now looks less like a huge muscle man, and more like just a big, bald, tired dude. He's been through a lot that would explain his haggard appearance, however. Around 2007, he had double knee surgery, which became infected and forced him into bed for 6 months. Then he fell unconscious during a flight and was comatose for a month. He lost 112 pounds in the most effective diet plan no one should ever try. In 2016, Vader tweeted he'd been diagnosed with congestive heart failure and had 2 years to live. He later retracted the timeline, but sadly it turned out to be pretty accurate. He died June 18, 2018. Before he passed, he kept fighting and kept inspiring as a motivational speaker for the Wounded Warriors Alliance. As he told WWE.com, "These guys may have one arm or one leg, may have been shot in the shoulder or the chest. I stand up in front of them and tell them what I've been through. ... If this old man can do what he did and come out on the other side and actually be here tonight, then what can someone do at 23 with their whole life ahead of them? Let's face it, when a mastodon speaks, you listen." Bob Backlund. Mr. Bob Backlund is an old-school legend. In the 70s and 80s, he was a clean-cut, technically brilliant, low-key strong world champion. In the 90s, he had reinvented himself as a crazy, out-of-touch old man who wanted to teach young kids what true morality was. He even ran for president in 1996, in Storyline, and then he actually ran for Congress after all but retiring from wrestling in 2000. Since leaving wrestling, Backlund has slimmed down considerably, to the point where he doesn't even look like an ex-wrestler, never mind a wrestler. In 2012, he had a one-off showdown with WWE wrestler Heath Slater, shown in the video above, and he looked almost emaciated. He looked more himself several years later, when briefly, life coaching Darren Young, though that was likely due to his wearing a shirt and bow tie. Sans clothing, you're still likely to wonder why that Bob guy doesn't eat a sandwich and hit the gym. Kamala. For much of Kamala's career, he was billed as the Ugandan giant, a cannibal from deepest, darkest Africa. He spoke no English, barely seemed to understand what a wrestling match was, wore tribal face paint and a loincloth, and would do things like eat a live chicken on the air. Later, he was saved by Slick, a pimp-turned-preacher, who convinced Kamala that he was a man, not an animal. Then they went bowling because wrestling is weird. Since his retirement from full-time wrestling in 1993, however, life has not been kind to Kamala, according to People. He was diagnosed with diabetes, and in 2011 it resulted in his leg being amputated. The following year, he lost his other leg, leaving him permanently confined to a wheelchair. Aside from that, he's still a big man, just not the bruiser he used to portray in the ring. He doesn't sound like Kamala either, as the character's grunts and shrieks have been replaced by a sweet baritone he uses to record soul music. He's clearly living his life in the best way a man in his position can hope to. Brian Knobbs is one half of the Nasty Boys. Brian Knobbs was appropriately nasty. Wearing all-black gear with graffiti lettering, sporting a mohawk, and indulging in his favorite activity, shoving an opponent's face into his partner's stinky armpit, Knobbs was the epitome of a big burly schoolyard bully. He was never ripped, but he was still clearly a muscular, tough dude. Today, Knobbs doesn't look anything like that. He still has the mohawk, but he's far from the big bully he used to portray. He's far fatter than he used to be, and just comes across as a guy pretending to be a punk, rather than an actual punk. in a way that makes modern-day Brian Knobbs Wrestling's answer to modern-day Johnny Rotten. Tugboat typhoon Fred Ottman is most famous for portraying one of two characters, the friendly tugboat, or the menacing typhoon. He's most infamous, meanwhile, for portraying the shockmaster, who never met a wall he couldn't trip over. However you prefer your Fred, he was a monster of a man, nearly 400 pounds of power and a menacing mug that struck fear in opponents' hearse even as he walked around the ring yelling toot toot. Today, the retired Ottman doesn't look anything like he used to. His long hair is now cut close, and he's got a goatee. Both hair and goatee are chalk white. He looks less like Tugboat or Typhoon and more like a 400-pound Kevin Nash. He looks good and healthy for his age, though, and that's really what counts most. He does look a lot like Shockmaster still though that's likely due to his wearing a mask and remaining adept at bumping into everything. Droz Darren Drozdov is perhaps the ultimate pro wrestling cautionary tale. Debuting in 1997, he quickly became known for his weird, colorful costumes, multiple piercings, and ability to vomit on command, seriously. But 2 years later, after his opponent, D'Lo Brown, botched a powerbomb and dropped Droz square on his neck, he found himself a quadriplegic. According to a 2014 Jim Ross article about Droz for Fox Sports, he's never blamed D'Lo for the life-changing incident, recognizing it for the total accident it was. It doesn't change the fact that Darren Drozdov has not walked since 1999. You can see the physical changes quite readily. Droz, unable to work out, has lost muscle and gained weight. His facial hair is now a big bushy chin-only goatee, as opposed to the thin wrap-around beard he sported in the WWF. He suffers from regular muscle spasms and painful migraines, which he suppresses and treats with a combination of pills and medical marijuana. And while he can move most of his upper body now, his legs are still paralyzed. Luckily for him, his college roommate was Kevin Plank, who's now the CEO of Under Armour. The two are still friends, and Plank designed an awesome tank-looking contraption called the Rip Chair so Droz can move around, hunt, and enjoy life again. It doesn't make up for being paralyzed, but hey, not everyone gets to ride around in a tank. Haku, Meng. Whether he was Haku in the WWF or Meng in WCW, Tonga Fafita played the same character, a tough-as-nails Tongan you'd rather not fight if you didn't have to. Stories of the man's legitimate toughness are legendary, though possibly exaggerated. That said, if an anecdote like Meng bit off a man's nose during a bar brawl is even half true, Tonga insists it's all true, but you know how wrestlers lie, that still makes him tougher than most anyone you've ever met. Today, Meng looks as close to a normal guy as someone that tough can look. His famously wild hair is cut super short, he's traded his ring robes and Islander-inspired tights for sensible polo shirts, and he works as a car spa director for David Mouse Toyota in Sanford, Florida. And no one loses a nose at his dealership, even if they wreck a new car during the test drive, probably. Bret Hart. The legendary Bret Hitman Hart is one of the most recognizable faces in wrestling history. With long, wet hair, a pink and black leather jacket, and pink wraparound sunglasses, Hart made wearing pink cool for guys for the first time in a long time. Sadly, Hart looks and acts a lot differently now, and not just because he's gotten older. He was forced to retire in 2000 after a severe concussion brought about thanks to a stiff kick to the head from Goldberg. 2 years later, he suffered a major stroke that caused paralysis on the left side of his body. He recovered after months of therapy, but his body has clearly changed. In the video above, he's much slower, his hair is mostly white, and even his glasses have reverted to normal shades. It's a look in sharp contrast to even the drawing of Prime Bret seen on the shirt of his niece, Natalia. But it could have been a lot worse, he could have not been with us at all.
Brutus Beefcake turned one of the silliest ideas ever. He's a barber, but he also wrestles, into an actual success. Between his shredded tights, conspicuous bow tie, giant garden shears, and wide-eyed, psychotic grin, he came across like a legitimately dangerous, crazy person than a guy who gently evens out your sides by day and bashes the Iron Sheik's skull in by night. Today, Beefcake is mostly retired, though he still works the occasional independent show. But if he's not wearing his gear and wielding those shears like his life depends on chopping off some heel's precious ponytail, you'd hardly know it was him. He's much heavier now, and his hair is far shorter, almost like he did a barber job on himself. He, like many wrestlers before him, battled drug issues. In 2004, the Boston Herald reported that Beefcake caused a scare on the Boston subway system by leaving behind a bag of his cocaine that passengers feared was anthrax. He checked himself into rehab shortly thereafter and appears to have mostly taken care of himself since. He may not look as great as he did in the 80s, but considering his face was all but shattered in a 1990 parasailing accident, the fact that he's still kicking period is nothing short of a miracle. King Kong Bundy. King Kong Bundy was an 80s wrestling monster. At 450 pounds, with a big bald head, no visible neck, and an evil glare in his eyes, he was Hulk Hogan's first giant opponent, and the footage of him injuring Hogan's ribs in 1986 is still etched into many an aging Hulkamaniac's brain. For the rest of his life, Bundy, retired since 2006, was still big and bald, but he stopped looking much like the Bundy of old. He definitely lost some weight, and simply walking around with normal facial expressions made him look far more like a regular person than a guy so mean and strong that calling him King Kong was no exaggeration. Plus, he dabbled in stand-up comedy, not exactly the expected career path for a villain. But it makes sense, as interviews like this one from 1985 show that Bundy, despite most monster wrestlers staying ominously silent, could always talk up a storm. Turning "I will break your ribs" into "I will tickle your ribs" isn't too difficult for a guy like him. Sadly, King Kong Bundy died in March 2019. News of his passing brought an outpouring of support, including from colleagues like Hurricane Helms, who posted the above photo along with the tribute, "Rip my friend. Thanks for your humor and kindness. Awesome Kong." Karma. Awesome Kong was a mammoth of a woman who could, and still can, mix it up with both guys and girls. Her brief WWE run as Karma was cut short by a pregnancy, which sadly ended in her baby's death, and since then she's been a part-timer in wrestling. Since her WWE and TNA runs, Kong has become a totally different person. She's dropped tons of weight, which she proudly shows off in her Twitter profile picture. She isn't wrestling much anymore, but she still plays a wrestler in TV. That's because she's signed onto the Netflix revival of Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, playing a character called Tommy who's forced to portray a wrestling welfare queen. As she told TV Guide, she can relate to Tommy because she too was saddled with a character she initially didn't like, being called Kong, which can be a huge insult for an African American person. But, as she said, being Kong was this big opportunity, just like Tommy has, but the price is she's gonna portray a welfare queen. I decided, and I believe Tommy would identify with what I did, to take that name and own it and make it mean something of respect. If she ever does return to full-time wrestling, she'll have just as much respect as she did when she left. Gene Snitsky. Gene Snitsky had two main looks as a WWE superstar: hulking monster with hair and a long, ponytailed beard, or hulking monster with no hair at all, not even eyebrows, along with yellow teeth and a generally ugly appearance. Since 2008, though, Snitsky's been mostly gone from wrestling, and focusing on several other ventures. These days, Snitsky looks mostly like he did when he started in WWE, meaning he grew his hair, beard, and eyebrows back. But he acts totally differently, no more so than when he served as a pitchman for the Power Pressure Cooker XL in 2014. Yes, that's real. He went on YouTube and taught us how to use the XL to make delicious buffalo wings and surf and turf on one easy-to-use pot. In addition, he's been using his size in more apropos ways, like bodyguarding. In 2013, according to CBS Local, Snitsky was serving as a member of Yankees legend Alex Rodriguez's security team. When a 6 feet 8 inches behemoth warns fans, as he did when speaking to PennLive.com, hopefully for the fans' sake, they stay in the stands. Because if they don't, there could be a problem. Not for me, but for them. So my advice would be, stay in the stands, cause if not, you might get hurt. People take him seriously, no matter how nice he seems off the clock.